Right now in South Korea, a disturbing and bizarre situation is actually unfolding right now. For years, loud segments of the population, specifically certain feminist groups, proudly declared they were done with marriage, done with dating, and absolutely positively done with having kids. They championed non-marriage, non-dating as the ultimate liberation, stating women have every right to reject traditional beauty standards and opt out of the entire system. And society, for the most part, just shrugged, saying, okay, cool, you do you. This movement, often termed tal corset, which meant taking off the corset of societal expectations, was portrayed as a powerful act of resistance.
Wait, is that even true? Didn't they say that forever?
What's truly shocking is, just last month, on May 7, 2026, the Presidential Committee on Aging Society and Population Policy dropped a bombshell. A new survey reveals that the intention to have children among unmarried men and women in South Korea has shot up from a mere 29.5% to a whopping 40.7% in just 2 years. To put that in perspective, that's over a 10 percentage point leap. In a blink of an eye, their positive perception of marriage that jumped from 55% to 65% in a single year. That's a huge shift in sentiment. The very people who were supposedly leading the charge against marriage and babies, passionately arguing against these institutions, are now, according to the undeniable numbers, increasingly saying, you know what, maybe a family wouldn't be so bad after all. It's like watching someone loudly declare they're boycotting coffee, then getting caught with a triple shot latte 2 years later, claiming they always loved caffeine. The hypocrisy isn't just ironic, it's a laugh out loud, head-scratching contradiction staring us right in the face, broadcast for the entire world to see. But this was only the beginning. Why would they actually demand this in the first place? Why this sudden dramatic U-turn from a fervent anti-marriage stance to, well, this apparent reconsideration? The answer, my friends, is less about grand, unshakable ideology, and more about the blunt, uncomfortable truth of human psychology when confronted by the brutal logic of ruthless capitalist market dynamics. Let's be frank, the core issue here, as the market ultimately sees it, is the very being of certain Korean women. When these groups initially pushed for non-marriage and non-childbirth, it was often framed as an act of resistance against patriarchal expectations and perceived economic disadvantages. They believed they were asserting individual autonomy, bravely challenging a system that seemed to restrict their choices. They saw themselves as pioneers forging a new path.
So, it was all just a phase then?
But the cold, hard reality of living in a hyper-competitive, commodified society eventually sets in with the force of a tidal wave. When everything, and I mean everything, including personal relationships, social status, and future security, is viewed through a purely transactional cost-benefit analysis, a purely ideological stance becomes incredibly fragile. Being alone without the traditional safety nets of family support in a society that still deeply values collective success and strong intergenerational ties can become increasingly difficult and isolating as one ages. The initial demands weren't necessarily deep-seated personal convictions for everyone involved. For many, there was simply an alignment with a powerful social trend, a reaction to immediate grievances, rather than a well-thought-out, sustainable life plan. The fight for a share of the financial pie, for economic stability and personal security extends to all aspects of life, and sometimes that means reevaluating what truly offers the best return on investment for one's future, even if it means abandoning a previous, very public, and often very loud position. This re-evaluation often comes quietly, away from the public gaze. The real twist that makes this even more unsettling is, why are women in Korea often so susceptible to these kinds of intense social trends? Whether it's something like Tao corset, the public rejection of traditional beauty standards, or this dramatic sudden embrace of marriage and family, there's a pattern. It boils down to a fascinating blend of deeply ingrained historical societal structure and the dizzying speed of modern accelerated information flow. In South Korea, traditionally, there's been a very strong emphasis on collective identity, on fitting in with prevailing social currents, and on maintaining social harmony. While modern society often champions individualism in theory, there's still a powerful undercurrent of conformity that runs deep, especially within peer groups. It's a subtle pressure, but it's always there. What's almost impossible to believe is when a trend item emerges, be it a fashion statement, a lifestyle choice, or even an ideological stance like non-marriage, it gains traction incredibly fast. This isn't just about fashion choices, like everyone suddenly wearing the same brand of sneakers. It's profoundly about social belonging. If a prominent figure, say an influencer like Barina, publicly advocates for a certain lifestyle, whether it's rejecting makeup or embracing a minimalist existence, many will follow, often without deeply interrogating their own long-term desires or personal preferences. The non-marriage, non-dating movement gained momentum precisely because it tapped into a collective frustration and offered a seemingly empowering alternative, a sense of unity in rebellion. For some, it quickly became a badge of identity, a way to signal their alignment with a perceived progressive front. The motivation isn't always deeply personal or born from individual conviction. Sometimes it's just about being part of the wave, riding the current of public opinion because everyone else seems to be doing it.
That sounds like a lot of groupthink. It's like a social contagion.
Here's what's truly shocking. So what happened when these women, and critically the political figures who aligned with their vocal demands, got exactly what they asked for? Well, the birth rate plummeted, and it wasn't just a gentle decline. Under the previous administration, specifically President Moon Jae-in's tenure, South Korea's birth rate collapsed from 1.05 to a staggering 0.78. This wasn't just a dip. It was a free fall, an unprecedented and continuous plunge without a single rebound. The numbers were screaming. And get this, the government, in a frantic attempt to reverse this demographic disaster, pumped over 100 trillion won, that's roughly $73 billion into policies supposedly designed to fix this catastrophic decline. But the real nature of this incomprehensible situation is, where did all that staggering amount of money actually go? Was it into making it easier for everyday people to have and raise children? Providing affordable childcare, better housing, or direct financial support? Oh no! According to the meticulous analysis, it was largely funneled into unrelated, useless projects and research, often hidden under the vague banners of gender equality and structural approaches to improve women's lives. While noble in theory, the practical outcome was a massive and scandalous misallocation of resources, largely influenced by the very Pami-eon ideal, a term for radical feminists who so loudly championed non-marriage and non-childbirth. They pushed policies that seemed to empower women by dismantling traditional expectations, but in doing so, they inadvertently created a system where having children became an even less attractive, almost punitive option. The cold logic of capitalism, you see, doesn't care about your ideals or your progressive rhetoric. It cares about simple supply and demand, about undeniable cost and tangible benefit. When you deliberately create an environment where the perceived cost of having children is prohibitively high and the perceived benefit is vanishingly low, guess what? Birth rates tank. These groups, in their pursuit of a society less focused on traditional family structures, got their wish. And capitalism, with its brutal, unforgiving efficiency, delivered an emptier cradle.
I keep seeing these campaigns about me time and self-care pushed by the government, but never anything about actual childcare support for working parents. It's all just vague platitudes.
Exactly. And all these expensive workshops on deconstructing patriarchal norms that cost millions. Meanwhile, my rent is still sky high, and I still need real, practical help affording basic necessities like formula and baby food. It feels like a bad joke.
So they shot themselves in the foot, but with the government's money? That's next level?
The most devastating detail that defines this tragedy is the very same women who publicly denounced marriage and child-rearing, who advocated passionately for its rejection, are now, after facing the real world, often harsh consequences of their choices, reportedly begging for marriage. They are the stop lurkers, a term for those who are hiding in the shadows of their past ideological commitments, clinging to them publicly, but are now in private revealing their true, pragmatic, and very human desires for companionship and stability. It's a harsh but entirely predictable backfire of epic proportions. And where does this leave us today, after all that? The cold logic of capitalism, as always, delivers its final brutal lesson. These women, who once proudly championed non-marriage and non-childbirth, are now, in many cases, finding themselves in an increasingly difficult social and economic position. The social trend they followed, the ideological stance they so publicly adopted, has, for some, resulted in a stark realization that their long-term personal and economic security might be far better served by a stable partnership and a family. They've, as the local saying goes, realized their mistake after suffering consequences. There's a palpable sense of regret and urgency now.
I thought being truly independent meant never needing anyone, that I could forge my own path alone. Now, everyone around me has settled down and has support, and I feel really alone, adrift in my late 30s.
Well, you said you didn't want a husband. You wanted to dismantle the system, to reject traditional structures. You got your wish for a while.
And what's the result of this massive societal pendulum swing? The choice has now definitively passed to men. After actively discouraging men from pursuing marriage and family, after years of promoting a lifestyle that actively deprioritized these things, men are now in a supremely advantageous position. They are now highly selective, free to consider whether they want to marry someone who previously and often very publicly rejected the very idea of marriage and family. The market, both for relationships and for labor, has brutally adjusted to this new reality. Capitalism doesn't forgive, nor does it forget past declarations. It simply recalculates the value of everything, including people's stated preferences and past actions. And when demand shifts so dramatically and the supply of desirable partners becomes imbalanced, the power dynamic fundamentally changes.
This is pretty wild. Who saw this coming? It's a huge shift in power.
The naive, contradictory demands of a few, amplified by pervasive social trends and tragically misdirected government spending,